the fuss is a conversation we're having tonight. You've heard a lot of the parties condemning the filing fee, but really, isn't democracy expensive? We're going to look at that tonight here on the show. We know that the EC has opened the nominations and the deadline has firmly been fixed. But what is causing the controversy is the amount involved. The 100,000 CD that the presidential candidates will have to cough up, and the 10,000 is not so much of an issue, for the parliamentary candidates, because that hasn't really changed from 2016, hasn't changed at all. It's the 100,000 CDs that has become a big deal for the political parties. In 2016, for example, and this is where the parties begin to raise concerns. In 2016, it increased, the EC increased the filing fee for presidential candidates from the 2012 amount of 10,000 to 50,000 CDs. Even then, it was a big deal. And then in 2020, it goes all the way to what? 100,000. That is a complete 100% jump in the amount there, which has become a key issue of contention for some of the political parties. The question of also about the EC's consultation has been key. Should the EC be consulting the political parties on putting and fixing the filing fee? Civil society had said that this is part of the problem of monetizing Ghanaian politics. I have my guest joining me tonight to look into this. We have the CDD's Dr. Kojo Asante joining me tonight. We have the CPP's Nana Janto, who is the General Secretary of the party, also joining me. We have the General Secretary of the NDC, Jones Cecilin Kitia, who joins us currently via Zoom, and the Electoral Commission's Director of Electoral Services, Mr. Siribo Kwaku, is also joining us. In fact, it's to him that I start because the parties have asked for clarity. Mr. Siribo, Dr. Siribo, I'm grateful that you could join me here on PM Express. Let me start with you. For the 100,000 CDs that the EC announced yesterday, what precisely went into fixing this amount that you announced yesterday?
Okay, Evans, greetings to you and greetings to colleague panelists and your listeners. What I would say is that the Constitution, the CI 127 mandates the Electoral Commission to fix deposit for candidates as they try to file. And that is exactly what we did. And it has, from time that we joined the countries of democracies, every time that there's going to be election, the deposit is fixed and people will talk about it. If you look at it, 2012, for instance, as compared to 2016, as compared to 2012, it jumped by 400%. I'm talking about the presidential. And this year, it only jumped by 100%. Then for the parliamentary, it was maintained. And you all know that if you look at 50,000 in 2016, the value of that amount cannot be the same as it is. So in terms of economic value of the money and other issues, then we decided. But let us all understand that this is just a deposit. So if you file by CI 127, if you give me time, I will read it to you. If you're able to secure 25% for presidential, your money is refunded to you in full. So it's just a deposit.
Well, if you don't mind explaining, just repeating what you just said there about why you say it's a deposit. We lost you briefly. The line wasn't great. Kindly repeat that for me.
Okay. I want to read the CI 127. It used to be CI 94. It has been amended, and we have CI 127 at Regulation 8, Sub-Regulation 3. And I read, a person,
You're live on PM Express tonight.
Yes.
My guest is Dr. Sribo
Yes.
Kwaku.
It should be regulation 8, sub-regulation 1B. It reads, a candidate for presidential or parliamentary election shall, at the time of the nomination of the candidate, deposit or create to be deposited an amount of money determined by the Electoral Commission. And when you go to regulation 46, the same CR 127.
Yes, that's CI
127. I'm reading CI 127.
Okay.
That is the current CI that we will use for the 2020 elections.
Yeah.
And it goes further to say that regulation 46, sub-regulation 1B, and it says that where a poll is taken, so 3B, where a poll is taken, and after completion of the counting of the votes, including recount, in the parliamentary election, more than 12.5%, the total valid vote, more than 12.5% of the total valid vote cast within the constituency. And B, in a presidential election, not more than 25% of the total vote cast, the candidate shall forfeit the deposit made, and deposit shall be paid into the consolidated fund. So that means that it is a deposit you are going to contest an election to win. And in Ghana, for you to win an election, you need no less than 50%. And I believe all the candidates are contesting because they want to win. But he said that if you don't win and you get more than 12.5% for parliamentary and 20% or more, your money is refunded to you. So it is just a deposit.
I mean, I'll bring my guest in very shortly, but I want you to break down for me, because a question that has been asked is, the EC's justification I've only heard is that, well, in 2016 it was 50,000. If you consider inflation, etc., in 2020, it's a fair amount to increase it by 100%. But this 100,000, what accounts for that increase? I mean, what is it that you're using the money for? You have to break it down to justify it. What is the breakdown? Was it arbitrarily decided that, well, let's just slap 100% on this and just charge them because it's politics? Or there is a certain calculation the EC made to arrive at a very objective figure of 100,000?
You see, what you should understand is that is what the law says. And you know what, in going into an election... But
the law doesn't say you should charge 100,000, does it?
So any amount that you charge, the law doesn't state it. But we should bear in mind that when you are going to conduct general elections, it's a very expensive venture. So you need to go by the law, and I believe the framers of the law will be able to explain. But at least it will mean that some of the money will be left for... Once it's going to the consolidated fund, it is through the consolidated fund that the money used for election is also secured.
Okay.
So I believe the framers want it such a way that at least it will be able to defray some of the cost.
Okay. I mean, unfortunately, the line isn't great, but I'll come. But I think I get a gist of what you're saying. Your point is that fundamentally, the 100,000 that they'll pay goes to defray part of the cost of running the elections itself.
I suspect that is the mindset of the framers of the law.
Okay. I'll bring in the General Secretary of the NDC shortly, who's joined us via Zoom. But let me bring in the General Secretary of the CPP, who joins us in the studio, Madam Nanaya Jantwa. Yesterday, you asked for specifics. Yes, you say the 100,000 isn't enough until they tell you what it is for. Yes. He's attempted to explain it. Does that satisfy you?
I don't think he has explained it thoroughly. I believe that there's some antecedental arbitrariness when it comes to the EC exacting the administrative discretion. I have worked in the public service for some time before branching into politics. And every institution like the EC, like the PRC, as I worked with, an independent institution, have some discretionary powers to take certain decisions. But in view of taking those decisions in the ambit of the situation, the situation in which you find yourself, you need to also consider to know that you have stakeholders who are interested or who will be affected by the decisions that you take. This kind of antecedental arbitrariness, I think, it has to end. Because if you look at 2012, there was a certain amount of money they charged, 1,000 Ghana for the parliamentary, and everybody was okay with it. Come 2016, we all thought that even if there is maybe a 300%, a 100%, it will go to 2,000, 3,000. It jumped to 1,000%. And now as we sit here, it has jumped to 100%. And he's talking about the economic value of the money. Is he trying to tell us that inflation has gone up by 100%? Is he telling us that the exchange rate, the volatility of the exchange rate is so bad that our cedi has depreciated by 100%? If you talk about economic value, then it means you are looking at these parameters. And are these parameters affecting the increase? He's also saying that running an election is an expensive venture.
But it is.
Yes, but are they telling us that the money that they are collecting from candidates is what they are going to use to run the election?
It's just part of it will defray the cost.
I mean, but
it goes into the consolidated fund where you put the money.
Have you ever seen consolidated money going to consolidated fund and it's coming out? Because he said if you get 12,500, your money will be refunded to you. So
but that's what the law says.
So does it mean that every time people get 50+1, the president and all the candidates,
they get money refunded?
They get money refunded.
He's still on, so I'll get the clarity for you before we leave, because that is an important point.
If it get refunded to them?
This law was recently amended, and so it's possible that this particular clause was introduced in the recent amendment. But I'll ask him for clarity on that. Your other colleagues have joined us on the line, and so I want to bring in General Secretary of the NDC, Mr. Johnson Seydou Nketia, on this particular subject. Mr. Seydou Nketia, I'm grateful that you could join me. I know you've been in Kumasi very busy today with your town hall meeting, so thank that you made time to talk to us. You've heard the amount, 100,000 cedis. This is, that's a drop in the ocean for the NDC, correct? You don't have a problem with it, do you?
Well, thank you very much, and good evening to viewers. First of all, before you can pass judgment as to the sufficiency or otherwise of the deposit, you must go back to the fundamentals. What is the purpose of the deposit? Is the deposit supposed to be a contribution towards the funding of the elections, or it is supposed to be a deterrent to prevent people who are otherwise not serious candidates from contesting, or what is the purpose? So far, the Commission has not been able to explain sufficiently the purpose of this deposit. So it becomes difficult for proper judgments to be passed as to the quantum of the money. I don't accept the explanation is given that the deposit is supposed to go towards funding the cost of the elections, because the Constitution is very, very clear that the expenses of the Electoral Commission and others are supposed to be charged directly on the consolidated fund. And so there is no provision anywhere which says that the Commission's activities ought to be funded by deposits of candidates. So that argument is not valid. At least we know that when political parties are fixing their filing fees, the purpose of the filing fees is to partly raise money to defray the cost of holding the elections itself, the activities itself. Otherwise, the activity cannot happen. And it is also tried to acknowledge that political parties have been arguing for some state funding so that politicking becomes less expensive in the country. So far, we don't seem to have gotten any part funding or subsidy or anything. So parties are left to their own designs as to how to raise funds to conduct their internal activities. So if political parties are charging filing fees, it is clear and understandable that without those fees, the activity itself of selection of candidates becomes impracticable. But at least the Electoral Commission's source of funding has been designated in the Constitution. And there is no law in Ghana that says that the Commission's activities must be funded by contributions from political parties. Indeed, there have been several research findings that have turned out conclusions that seem to suggest that the way the cost of politicking is rising in Ghana, it is a threat to our democracy. And it is a contributory factor to the rising corruption in the country, because financing of politicking is a major source of corruption in the country. That is one of the root causes of corruption. Because if you are going to put people in office and the process of getting into that office is so expensive that the salaries of elected officials cannot reasonably be expected to defray the cost of getting into that office, then it is obvious that the elected persons would have to look elsewhere to defray their cost.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. You actually also raised an important point that I was going to come to, which is the comparison between what the internal party arrangements also come up with, say in presidential and parliamentary primaries, and what the EC is doing. I have heard your explanation about for the parties, they rely on that to run the internal processes. But for the NDC, you last, for example, said 400,000 CDs I've seen, and then 25,000 CDs for the parliamentary candidate. Even that, isn't that a bit over the top and achieves the same end of fueling corruption as you complain about? I mean, so the parties are as guilty maybe as the EC too.
No. If you follow my argument very well, the bulk of the money so collected are paid to the same Electoral Commission, because they charge for conducting the elections. And an organization which subsists on state funding, if they have to contribute to bringing down the cost of politicking, all they need to do is to conduct the elections for internal party elections free of charge. So that about 2/3 or 3/4 of the filing fees that are collected by the parties from candidates would not be necessary to be collected at all in the first place. So it is because the commission charges political parties for the conduct of their internal elections. The parties have no choice. Either they proceed to do elections without the involvement of the Electoral Commission, which will go against the Constitution, or they find means of footing the bill. And the most readily available means is to increase filing fees. So the increase of filing fees for the internal party elections are still blamable on the commission, and by extension to the state. And we have always been making the point that, look, you cannot eat your cake and have it. If the state reneges on the responsibility of, offering support for political parties, the state will suffer because by all means, presidents will come from this process, MPs will come from this process, and several state officials will come from this process. And when they come from the process, they will design means of recouping the money. And that is what ends up in corruption.
Corruption that we see.
So it would have been better for the state to help the Electoral Commission to do these internal party elections pro bono, and then make it easier for candidates to also file when they are contesting national elections. That will contribute significantly to the reduction of the cost of politicking.
Yeah,
and additionally,
I mean, just a second. I'll come.
It becomes easier for the state to demand accountability.
Yeah, I mean, because that's the point that he's making. Mr. Soninke, just stay with me. But you agree with him. I mean, I wonder. Yes, I do. You just recently was elected. Yes. What was the filing arrangement? Or how much did you have to pay?
For my filing
fees. Well, what did your party, CPP, what did you decide internally as a filing process? You also have elected a presidential candidate.
Yes, I'm not too sure about what the presidential candidate paid, because at that time I was a candidate myself. Yeah. So I wasn't interested in.
Yeah, but for you?
I think I paid about 30,000 or something like that.
Goodness me, but that's the point, right?
No, but the point that he's making, did you listen to him?
I get it. That is, you pay a bulk of that to the Electoral Commission.
Yes, and to also organize the internal elections. Because, for instance, you don't have any subsidy or subsistence from anybody from outside the party. Yeah. For within the party, this is about like a fundraising that you are doing to run the internal elections. And especially in this situation of COVID, we need to decentralize. And decentralizing is more expensive.
So it costs more.
It costs more.
So your 30,000 went straight into the actual activity of organizing
straight into the actual activity of organizing. With the EC, I believe that as
the syndicator
has said, they have funding from government, from donor community, from other sources. So they should even explain to us why they are taking this.
You know what? Let me ask that of Dr. Cerebral, because I think it's a fundamental question. Dr. Cerebral, thank you that you stay with me, because this is important. The Parliament approved a budget, a huge budget for you for the 2020 elections that all of us will pay for, the taxpayer. So again, if that having taken care of is completely being sorted by the taxpayer, why then must you charge an additional 100,000 then, and a 10,000 for parliamentary aspirants? For what exactly? What will that money do? Because the taxpayer is already bearing the cost.
I think Nanaya and my anchor said that I want to correct the impression. What I said was that for presidential elections, you should get 25%. I didn't say any good figures in terms of numbers of votes accrued. Okay. But I'm talking of percentage terms. Mm-hmm. And I also said that for the parliamentary, you should also get 12.5%. Okay. And I said that if you look at the law, it says that if you are not able to accrue those percentages, the deposit goes into the consolidated fund. Mm-hmm. And I said that if you go to consolidated, that's where elections are funded. So I expect that by the mindset of the framers of the law, if you are taking money from somewhere to do elections, then maybe there's a way of maybe trying to also contribute towards. That's why I said maybe that's why they came out with this deposit. But I can assure you that no matter the figure you put, people will still complain about the figure. So, as I said, if we agree that the deposit should be charged, then how much is sufficient?
Yeah, I mean, but so the question that I still didn't get to ask, which I think is relevant, is what is the purpose of the deposit?
Yeah.
If this question should be put to those who came out with the law, it is in the law.
No, but the EC, so you are implementing the law, okay? The law says deposit. Yes. The law didn't tell you how much. I'm sure if you had said 1,000
yes.
cedis, if you had said 1,000 cedis, nobody would complain. But so you're the only people who can tell us what went into deciding that for this year, pay 100,000. What is it? What do you intend to use that 100,000 for?
We are not using it directly, but as I said, if you are not able to accrue that percentage, those who will lose their votes should go into the considered fund. We shouldn't lose our refund. I started by saying it's a deposit. So if you know you are going to get the 25%, then you don't have any problem.
So let me ask a follow-up.
I think my uncle said what I wanted to say, but he ran away from that. So I think there should be something for, if you want to be the president of Ghana, it should be somebody who is able to mobilize resources. The money should not come from one person. So for me, I think that if you are going to pay a whole somebody institution who wants to be in charge of the affairs of the country, you are not able to organize 100,000 to contest an election, then there's a challenge.
Okay, so
and as I said, you are going to contest to win. The intention of contest is to win. And if you're going to win, you're going to get more than 50%. So if you're going to contest, if you win, you get your money. If you're not able to get 25%, you refund it to the consolidated fund. And that's where the money is used to sponsor elections and the rest. So I believe that the framers' intention was that you took money from somewhere. So if they are not able to pay for it, you should be able to use it to pay part of the money you took from there.
I see 2 points coming out of what you're saying. And let's break it down. It appears to me that what you're saying, that the first leg of this is that the money is also a barrier for entry to prove that you are really worth your salt, okay? So that if you can't raise 100,000, then you don't have a business trying to be president. I think that's the first leg I see. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's the first leg of the purpose of the money.
That's what my uncle said, and I'm just supporting him.
Okay, so that's then the second leg is also that, well, if you don't make a certain threshold, that's in 25% at the presidential and 12.5% at the parliamentary, then that money you paid goes into the consolidated fund. So it doesn't come to the EC. It goes back to our collective chest.
Exactly.
Okay. So the question then becomes, this particular provision, has it always been there that in 2016, for the NDC and the MPP, the 50,000 they paid, you refunded that amount to them?
I want Uncle Zidun to answer that question.
Oh, I mean, answer it, then I'll bring him in.
It has always been part of the. It has always been part of the law. So for since 92, anybody who contests the presidential election pay the deposit, and anybody who is able to cross the threshold, the total amount is refunded to them, and we always refund that. Interesting.
Let me bring in Dr. Kojo Asante, who's joining us from the CDD. Doc, your reaction to this? I mean, hasn't the EC justified this then? That definitely you must have a certain barrier, and the financial barrier must be one of those, that you must necessarily be able to mobilize resources if you are serious about leading this country. That's one. Secondly, if you cannot, and the law has it in it, hit a certain threshold of 25% of the votes at the end, then there's a penalty of you now losing that 100,000 goes into our collective chest, consolidated fund. If you hit 25% and above, you get the money back. So really, what's the fuss about?
Well, good evening, and good evening to your viewers, and good evening to the panelists. I don't know which part of the Constitution we are referring to in laying this argument. And it looks to me that we are trying to turn our democracy completely on its head. You have to remember that the political rights that are enshrined in the Constitution, that's where it starts from. The authority that the EC has comes from the Constitution. So the CIs and so on that have been laid in Parliament and so on are all subsidiary legislation to the Constitution. So let's deal with the principles first. What the filing fee is an administrative charge for a service or for facilitation of a political right. Now, by that description, the principle that's embedded in it is that it has to be for cost and cost only. Generally, any public service that is rendered has to be for cost. It's the same reason why, whether it is that, you are giving for crime and, all kinds of other services that are rendered to citizens, there is a strenuous effort to ensure that it doesn't become an impediment to accessing either access to justice or any kind of public service. So that's the starting point. And when you have a right like the right to vote, to put yourself out, to be voted for, these are all political rights that actually encompass the democratic system that we have chosen to operate. And that is where I think everybody should start from. And then you take a discretion. So the EC is given a discretion to exercise in terms of charging an administrative fee. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that as part of the criteria for becoming a president, you are supposed to show that you can mobilize resources. The eligibility criteria for presidential candidates are very clear in Article 62. So there is no justification for that, right? So if the EC is exercising discretion, then we have to look at Article 296 A and B. It has to be fair and candid. It does not have to be arbitrary, biased, or in any form. And so that is why it is important to understand what is the cost build-up for the 100,000 that the EC is charging. If the EC is able to show that in administering the nomination that are submitted to it by various aspirants, they are going to incur outside of their already allocated funds additional cost of 100,000 per candidate, then, well, we would like to see it. But I think that this kind of action only goes further to make the cost of our politics and our democracy even more difficult.
I mean,
and
sorry, I'll come to you.
And the challenge I have is that we keep trying to use other ways to address an obvious problem of disciplining the party process. The Constitution itself has inbuilt mechanisms for ensuring that parties are active, that they are actual parties on the ground, and they are doing things. The EC has a mandate to ensure that these parties are functioning so that they don't come up on election during the election year to present a presidential candidate. If that is the problem that we have, that is how we should address it. We shouldn't use the back door illegally, unconstitutionally, to try to impede the process. And that is what we have done election after election. So I think that we just have a problem. We have another problem that we have to solve. We don't solve it. And then we keep using, the back door to try and fix a problem that is not the solution.
I mean, I want to bring in Nana Janto. I mean, but seriously, I mean, I hear the argument about if this is an illegal way of trying to sift the field for the presidential candidate. But doesn't Dr. Sriba has a point in saying that if you want to be president, you must at least manage to mobilize resources?
I have a problem with that one. Are you telling me that now we are monetizing leadership? That is it a quality for you that if you have all the qualities to rule this country, you are committed, you love Ghana, you have the intellect, you have the ability to do it, you want to move this country, you have the passion, and you need to be a fundraiser to be able to mobilize 100,000 Ghana cedis for you to be the president? So then what Mr. Siedun Ketia said holds a lot of steam and water, that then when they come into office, then there is the issue of corruption. Then there's the issue of payback. Because if I contributed to your election and I need something from you, you owe me one. Because for me, if being a presidential candidate or a president for Ghana, one of the criteria is to be able to mobilize funds, monetization. of our democracy, then there's a problem.
Are you discounting that as a factor at all? That shouldn't be.
Well,
That should be.
Evans, Evans,
Yeah.
can I jump in here?
Yeah, please do.
Please, I mean, are we the presidential candidate? Is there a job for a marketing manager or like a treasurer or some kind of? Is that what we are claiming? This argument has been used several times, and maybe within the parties when they are contesting, that you need to be able to mobilize money and so on for the party, and therefore, that is an important trait for a leader.
But isn't it? But isn't it, Dr. Santi? Even the advanced democracies, it's still fundamentally a skill that determines whether a candidate continues in the race or drops out. If we hear in the race in the US, anytime a candidate drops out, primarily because he's not getting enough funding, and that is the surest way to show people believe. It's the surest way to make people believe in your ideas.
No. Evans, it's not getting funding maybe because people are not committed or don't have are not invested in his ideas or believe in his leadership. That's
a way to see people really.
But that is a different. No. I think we shouldn't conflict the issues. Nobody who is elected president is going to use his own money to run the country. His ability to finance development it depends on multiple things, even just to be able to motivate a very intelligent finance minister to find the right amount of resources. So you cannot say that if I can mobilize money, that is the reason why I will be a better president than somebody who does not have the ability to mobilize. It's not mobilizing the money to go and finance development when he becomes president. So I mean, I think we have to separate those matters. This is a simple matter about an administrative process in the electoral process that we have to undertake in a democracy. The EC is a public body that is charged with facilitating a very simple process of nomination. It has to charge an administrative fee. And then you have to ask what goes into charging an administrative fee. I argue that it has to be for cost and cost only, not only because it's a public service, but it is also a political right. If we could even get it for free, it would be better. That's why in the US it's $500. Wow. That's why in Canada it's whatever. In Africa, it is a practice that in Nigeria the filing fee is ridiculous. But that just adds to the problems we are not addressing the source of the problem, and we keep finding other ways to cure it and creating more problems.
Yeah, I mean, so
we need to deal with the source of the problem.
I need to wrap up on your point you're making before
Which point is that he interrupted?
I mean, but the point about that it shouldn't be a barrier.
My apologies.
No apologies. You see, it shouldn't be a barrier because, for instance, if you cannot mobilize funds, you're talking about the US. The US one is mobilizing funds for the whole process. Yeah. It is not just the presidential candidate. The way they do it, maybe $5, $10 here, and people pay small. But if somebody has to come up with 100,000, that is a lot of money we are talking about in this time of even COVID. This time that everybody is almost broke. And how are we going to do that? Dr. Santi was talking about cost. We need to find out, it has to be broken down to us. Because the point is that what cost are we talking about? Which part of the costs that EC is using this administrative money to defray? Is it for filing? Is it for, putting the documents together?
Because, or printing the
documents.
Even now it's going to be online.
It's going to be online because of COVID. So which part of cost?
Maybe setting up the website for you to download.
Whatever. They should break it down. This is transparency. Because you see, even though they have the discretion to do certain things, as I said before, there are stakeholders. We have IPAC. Why didn't you call a meeting for us to deliberate? And Nicodemously in the night, as we all sitting there behind our TVs watching breaking news,
100,000.
100,000 Ghana cedis. 100% increase. You said the economic value of 50,000 has eroded. Hey, we didn't know that the economy is that bad, that everything has been eroded by 100%. Do you understand? So, I mean, there should be some explanation, because they should even tell us their sources of funding. Now that this has come up, there should be transparency. What money do they use to run the election? Is it money from government because they are an independent body? Are they getting a levy from somewhere to do that?
The Parliament approved a certain amount for them.
That is what I am saying. So they should let us know that the money that was approved for them, what is it used for? What is this one used for? Then are they also saying that if I lose the election and I don't do well at all, I'm very abysmal at the level of the elections, it means I'm punished. My money is not given back to me.
This was quoting the law. It's just the letter of the law.
No, but that is the point.
If you don't get it,
that is the point. I mean, is the spirit and letter of the law, but the point is that is it a punishment? Do you get me? And now you're also monetizing politics, that's the ability to raise funds. So if there is anybody, excuse my language, anybody, a lunatic can just raise funds and say that I can pay 100,000 and the person qualifies to be a presidential candidate, because there are independent candidates who don't belong to structures, they don't belong to any party. They can come up and raise 100,000 and they are presidents of Ghana. And they can be presidents of Ghana. Is that it?
I'm going to take a break. When I return, Jonathan Ketia will join me, because some say the incumbent parties, when they are in power, when the fees are cited, they don't complain. In fact, they applaud. In fact, and we've seen the MPP say, yeah, if you can't afford it, get out, as the Deputy General Secretary of the MPP had said. The NDC is also alleged to have said similar things in 2016 when the 50,000 was said. I mean, so really, are the two main parties part of the problem because they are not committed to fixing the fundamental issues as Dr. Asante had raised? When we come, I'll put that to Jonathan Ketia. Stay with me. My guest on PM Express, the General Secretary of the NDC, Jonathan Ketia. Also with me is General Secretary of the CPP, Nanaya Ajantwa, CDD's Dr. Kojo Asante, and the Electoral Commission's Dr. Sirbo Kwaku. Mr. Jonathan Ketia, so the NDC had an opportunity to help do something about this. At least Dr. Sirbo Kwaku quotes the law to back what you're doing. What's your take on the responsibility that the NDC and MPP have when they get a chance to govern to fundamentally fix this problem? I think I've lost him briefly because of his line as frozen. Let's see if we can get him back to answer that question, because it's key. I mean, they were in government once before and they blessed. But so what do you want to see now? Because the amount has been set. Yeah,
yes, the amount has been set, but I do not think that the situation has to end there. I mean, you can't repair it. So I believe that there should be an emergency IPAC for us to go in there to discuss the situation thoroughly and find out the reason why this amount has been set at this level. As I said before, we do not take the economic value, the issue of the economic value. As we're discussing behind the scenes, has the cedi depreciated by 100%? If you use economic value as your argument, then you are telling us that the cedi has depreciated by 100%. Also, you're talking about administrative costs. As it stands now, the administrative cost is shifting to the candidates. Because now with the online portal that you have to go and download and fill, you are doing your own download, you are printing your own forms, you are using toner, you are using Wi-Fi and all that. It is your administrative cost. So this money that they are collecting, what are they using it? They should be able to tell us, break down and tell us that this, if it is justifiable, why not?
We're ready to bet.
Yes.
Let me bring in Mr. Ketia. So I was asking a question earlier about the commitment of the two main parties. You get to govern. You have the power to do something and fix the challenges with the law that Dr. Sirbo has quoted to back his stance. But they say NDC got a chance. In 2016, when the 50,000 was put there, the party said, yeah, it was cool. NPP is in power. They say 100,000. If you can't pay, get out. Where's the sincerity in that? Hello, Mr. Sirin Ketia, can you hear me? Hello, Mr. Sirin Ketia. Okay, let me bring in Dr. Kojo Asante. Doc, so what is a permanent solution to this? Because it's happened since 1992, still happening. One day, the filing fee will be a million cedis. How do we fix it? Hello, Dr. Asante. Hello, Dr. Asante, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm saying that. I mean, how do we fix this permanently? I mean, because I shudder to think that one day the filing fee will be a million cedis, easy.
I think that's why I think some of us are a bit disappointed, because I remember very vividly we discussed this extensively after the 2016 election at a stakeholder review meeting in Ada. And, it came back to the same issue, that we need to find solutions for the problems at the core. So what is a political party and how they operate in between elections is as important as during elections. And if we are worried about, parties proliferating, then we have to find, be stricter. The Electoral Commission has to be stricter in enforcing the rules in between elections, so that we don't have that problem come elections. Then when the parties are there, we know that they are strong, they can compete and so on. So that's one problem. But I think they have to maintain the principle. Whatever the Electoral Commission does is to facilitate and promote democratic rule, democratic practices. So it has to always remember that some of these activities are not dislodged from the basic principle of operating a democracy. So we need to go back. I mean, the Electoral Commission has to elaborate on some of the powers that is given to it under the Constitution. How exactly is it going to enforce the issue of presence, maintaining a presence on the ground and so on, how it would deal with independent candidates and so on. Those things have to be addressed through legislation, and also the EC beefing up its own monitoring process.
Let me ask.
That is what I would say.
Let me ask the EC, Dr. Sibro Kwaku. We've heard Madam Jantua say, call an emergency IPAC and let's discuss this. Will the EC call an IPAC to discuss this, especially now that you've introduced additional modalities for filing?
Evans, I think we are losing sight of the fact that I said this one is just a deposit. And I believe anybody who is going to this election intends winning. And winning means that you are getting 50% plus. So get your 25% and you get the money refunded.
So will there be an IPAC meeting on all the modalities and the filing processes, etc., etc.?
Oh, that one, I cannot say it here because I'm not the commission. So the commission, if any political party thinks that there's a need for any IPAC meeting, they should write to the commission. The commission will take a look at it, but I cannot speak for.
Nana, will you write to them?
Yes.
You write to the EC?
It will make an effort to write to them to say that this is it. We need a discussion, and I don't think that we can just push it under the cap. Even if it's a deposit, the candidates are going to look for the money. It can be a deposit, it's okay. But before it becomes a deposit, the money should be physical. It should be given. And that is where the issue is. We know it is a deposit, it is accepted, but that money has to be looked for and given before it becomes a deposit. And that is the process you want to find out. What is this money covering? Yes, what's it?
Nana Jantua, I'm grateful. She's the she's the General Secretary of the CPP. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time as well. Enjoy the rest of the evening.